So today, I want to talk to you about a mistake I made. A mistake where I had to be very vulnerable and admit that I was wrong. Several years ago, I met a former police officer in Richmond, Virginia. He was 42 years old. This man became injured in the line of duty, became paraplegic, and could not walk or live on his own. He was part of a federal demonstration program that transitioned people with disabilities out of nursing homes back into the community. This program paid for his brother's house to be retrofitted with all of the accommodations this man could actually need in order to thrive. He was very gracious and grateful to no longer be institutionalized, and we thought this was progress. At least that's what we thought. You see, this man was living alone for most of the day. He had a personal care attendant who came in during the morning and left around noon. His family didn't come home until about 6. He would have loved to fill those days and those times going to the community center, checking out a book out of the library, or in some cases, going to the police station to visit his buddies. Unfortunately, he lived in a cul-de-sac, and public transit only came into the entryway. So I want you to imagine this. He could see the bus stop from his living room window, but he had no way to get to it, let alone on it. With no access to public transit, he had no way to really be part of the community. He had no way to really fully enjoy the many things you and I take for granted. I spent a lot of time thinking about this man. You see, I had to get very real with myself and say that I was wrong and had been wrong for a very long time. I thought that when we transitioned people out of institutions, that we had solved their problems, that it was a job well done. What I didn't think was the fact that the lack of community integration and access to public transportation meant that he was isolated for most of the day and frankly a prisoner of his own environment. What we had done was transition him out of one institution to another. It's hard and difficult to admit a mistake to yourself. It's hard and difficult to be vulnerable to yourself or even to someone else. But that sense of vulnerability is what we need today in order to solve the nation's problems. And honestly, we need to start that now. Time is moving so much faster. In The Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens said, it was the best of times and the worst of times, and no doubt the last 2 years have been the worst of times. Millions of people have died and are dying from this pandemic. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed, with some never to reopen. Within days and weeks of the pandemic shutdown in March of 2020, millions of people lost their jobs, their livelihoods. Some of them are family members, some of them are friends, in some cases it might have been us. Through all of this, given the fact that millions of people have died from the pandemic, and our world has been turned upside down as a result of this pandemic, the United States has also been going through a period of racial unrest like never before. This pandemic has shown a glaring, unending spotlight on the weaknesses of our systems, the very systems that have created the foundation to ensure that we have an opportunity to live a longer, healthier, and more prosperous life. We have some really big problems to solve. We have some really big problems to solve. But I tell you this, we cannot and should not go back to normal. That normal excluded entire communities. That normal excluded entire income brackets, ages, races. That normal deprived so many people of life basic necessities. We've been through a lot, but I hate to say this, the tough part starts now. When tough things happen in our own lives, we take an honest look in the mirror to recenter and remind ourselves of who we are and reaffirm that things will get better. When the United States and the world looks in that mirror, we cannot have hope things will get better. We have to make them better through action. We cannot allow the last 2 years to have been in vain. So today I want to talk to you about 3 things that we need to do and we need to do today. The first one is that we have to have a conversation about what independence really means. The second is the idea that we need courage to start to build anew. And then finally, inaction is a decision we cannot afford to make. So first, let me talk to you about what independence really means. We have, for years, and frankly for decades, a false sense of independence. We believe that we have the right to independence. We have forgotten, though, that in order to value and embrace independence, we have to understand and accept interdependence or mutual dependence. True independence relies on us being mutually dependent on others. Think about that. When you're interdependent, you understand that you can do more working together than you can ever do on your own. And the things that we do on our own, based off those collective accomplishments, is what makes us happy, fulfilled, and healthy. Being interdependent is the only true way and long-lasting way to be independent. It's a win-win proposition that so many of us forget. For some reason, we get clinging to this notion that in order to be heard, in order to matter in our society, we have to be independent and don't need anyone for anything. That notion is based off fear and is one that we have to reckon with in order to be able to solve and be ready for the next challenges that comes our way. When you embrace the notion of fear and anger, you start to accept things that are unacceptable. You start to tolerate things that are frankly not tolerable. As a society and as a community and as individuals, we have to move from this idea of independence, which is based off an attitude of I, to the idea of interdependence, which is based off the attitude of we. Interdependence matters. People don't rely on buildings or organizations. People rely on people. It is only through this pandemic have we started to acknowledge out loud, see, and understand the impact of our decisions on other people. Not a data column on a spreadsheet, but real, actual people. That is interdependence at its core. And we have to be interdependent in the absence of ageism, sexism, and racism. Now is the time to build and create a new narrative of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and adopt a new vision for our collective future, one that embraces our interconnectivity and our interdependence. Second, I want to talk to you about courage, because it takes courage to build something new. Brian Stevenson, the founder and executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative, said that you cannot become an effective problem solver from a distance. There are details and nuances to the problems that you will miss unless you get close. Like I had to get close to that police officer in Richmond, Virginia, the one who could see the bus but could not get to it or on it. The one that I thought that we were doing the right thing and that it was normal, but it was not good enough. Let's be honest. It takes courage to get close to problems. It takes courage to admit that something that you supported now seems wrong. But COVID has demonstrated this and many other things that we need to address in terms of our systems in order to move forward. It takes courage to be able to listen to others. It takes courage to not just listen, but understand their preferences and their needs. And then more importantly, for those we serve, shift the way we think and see them, not based off what they lack, but in fact, in terms of what they bring. It takes courage to get close. It takes courage to build anew. And this is the time where we need to summon courage so much more than ever before. Courage is that mental and that moral strength to build anew, to persevere, to withstand fear, or difficulty. The Latin word for courage is cor, which means of the heart. So these things that we have to do them with heart. Trust, seeing the other person, and understanding where they're coming from. It takes courage to build anew. The third thing I want to talk to you about is that inaction is a decision that we cannot afford to make. Inaction means that things don't get better, things don't go the way that it used to go, or the way that it used to be. Inaction means that things get worse. Inaction means that we don't understand, nor do we value the interdependence that I mentioned before. So I have a question for you. What would it take, and what would it look like if we all had the opportunity to live our longest, healthiest lives? You see that disparities and inequities stifles economic growth, and they have been here well before COVID existed. We know based off research that it's not your genetic code, but your zip code that determines how long you live in this country. The average life expectancy in Florida is 80 years old, but we're seeing a widening gap in terms of longevity. If you live in Collier County, you can expect to live 83 years old. If you live in Union County, that is 67 years old. Think about that. The average is 80 years old. If you live in one county, you're likely to live to 67. That's literally a 13-year difference in life expectancy. Now, I want you to think back. What did you do in the last 13 years? Now, imagine if you didn't have those 13 years of life. Does that seem fair to you? All residents of all neighborhoods deserve the same number of years to be able to grow old with their spouses or partners, play cards with their friends, go to the local library, and watch their grandchildren grow old. We must act, because this longevity gap, if we do absolutely nothing, will cost our country $1.6 trillion in 2030. That's 8 years from now. We must act because this pandemic has put us on a global timeout for the last 2 years. The last 2 years we've been on pause, and it's given us an opportunity to do something that's much bigger and bolder than we can ever do on our own. The danger, though, is if we think that these problems are unsolvable. They are not. So in addition to acting, we need to tell ourselves a new story. And then we need to tell that story to others. We have an amazing opportunity to rewrite the script of a post-COVID America, a script where the sequel is much better than the first. We are the change that we've been waiting for. In everything that we do, and with everything that we have an opportunity to construct a future that builds wealth, strengthens health, and ensures the same educational and economic opportunity that benefits not just the privileged, but also those who are historically marginalized and everyone in between. This isn't wishful thinking. We can actually do this, but we have to be brave enough to want it, confident enough to plan for it, and courageous enough to make it happen. This is our time. This is our moment. We are at this crossroad for a reason, and we have an opportunity to reassess, redefine, and reprioritize what we collectively value and what we collectively say matters. So in closing, I want to share with you some words that means a lot to me that I hope will resonate with you. In his book, the late Congressman John Lewis said, "It is only in the continuum of change, through examining history, that we know where we stand." It is only through examining history. One day this pandemic will be history. Will it be a noticeable blip 100 years from now? Or will it be a defining mark where things got worse? That is up for us to decide through interdependence, courage, and action. Continuum of change. It's where we've been. It's where we are today. It's where we're headed. Where are you relative to where you want to be on this continuum of change? Again, it's up for us to decide through interdependence, courage, and action. And probably the two most important words of his quote, to become aware. Become means begin to be. Aware is the reflection of understanding a situation or a fact. Becoming aware is what happens when you get close, up close, to see the details. Like I had to get close to that police officer who we thought we were giving a sense of freedom when in fact we had imprisoned him in another broken system. So today I challenge you to be brave enough to be interdependent. I challenge you to get up close and personal, to listen and learn, make decisions and act, and to do it all with courage. I challenge you to become aware. No matter where you are on the continuum of life, you're never too old, too young, too poor, too rich to begin to be. I challenge you to not let others write our history books, but for you to start to write our history by solving the problems of this generation with courage and action. So let's write a new story. And let's make the script of America 2.0 more resilient, more inclusive, more powerful than the original. Thank you.